Have you ever wondered to yourself as you struggle with that pill bottle trying to remove the tamper-resistant seal off the inside, why does this have to be so hard? There are many things in which we just do each and every day, but we may not know why we do them, what caused it, or who inspired or created this. But even above and beyond those questions, there's an underlying and in many instances a deeper, darker instance that may be the foundation for all of these questions. Tonight we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, history, but not just any history. We're turning the lights down, channeling our fears and some of the sinister reasons behind what I'm going to call as dark secrets of every day. We invite you to join us as we explore some of these downright creepy, sinister, horrific events that got us to where we are today. And folks, that's right here for another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Shall we?
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
I wasn't even sure what you were talking about when you proposed the idea, which you have the text evidence to back that up. Because I was just like, what do you mean? And you were like, oh, well, this. You know, like, yeah, why do we have tamper-resistant pill bottle? Why do we?
And it doesn't all have to be dark and sinister.
Well, and then my question was like, oh, you mean like the pull tabs inside the trunk of the car or the refrigerator doors that don't latch in? And you're like, yeah, absolutely, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so obviously the two...
I didn't do either one of those.
And the two that I used as examples I didn't even touch on in the research. I just kind of did a search for like dark history of like everyday things. And basically it just brought up list after list after list. But then as I started going through the list, I was like, okay, that one's interesting. This one's interesting.
You can kind of cherry pick the ones and elaborate.
But once I kind of embraced it, I even found myself like, oh, honey, I just found out that the origin of pink lemonade. And my wife was like, okay. And she's like, oh, that's so gross. So
your wife's one inspired me to do this one. And honestly, I think this could be one where we even have a second one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think there's enough out there. Well, I'm going to start off with one called The Lemon Cure. Now, back in the dark and grim days of 1918, the Great Flu Epidemic, also known as the Spanish flu, the United States reported over 675,000 people died, more so than combined deaths associated with World War I, World War II, the Korean and Vietnam War.
Now, weird little, history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it rhymes. 1919, 1918, you have the Spanish flu decimating the population of the world. And then you jump ahead 100 years, and what do you get? COVID, yeah. COVID basically was supposed to do the same thing. And if you go back 100 years, you have another epidemic. It's just one of those, and I mean, it's off topic, but I found it to be an interesting little tidbit.
It's strange links in the chains.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't repeat, but sometimes it rhymes.
Well, there came a secret rumor that circulated quickly to the nation that was gripped in fear, and that was the lemon cure. Now, that is that lemons held the key to defeat this deadly virus, kind of similar to some of the COVID stuff later on.
Yeah, no kidding.
Newspapers and magazines printed articles, everything from sucking the juice out of a half of a lemon morning and night to eating them entirely, or even snorting the finely grated lemon rinds up your nose. That would be painful. I don't think I would want to do that.
Well, I was going to go back to the sucking. What would that do to your teeth? Well, I mean, it's going to strip the enamel off.
It's acid, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, people were in such crisis that the demand for lemons quickly outweighed the availability, causing lemon prices to skyrocket to 10 and even 20 times the normal price. As people hoarded these lemons, growers could pretty much name their price and come back with empty carts day after day for many months. Finally, the government stepped in and debunked the entire rumor as nothing more than false representation or misleading communication in a time of crisis. It's a good thing we remember and we learn from our histories past, right? Because nothing like that could ever happen again.
Never.
Remember toilet paper shortage of 20?
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Was toilet paper.
Yeah. Then we have the tamper-proof packaging that I mentioned in the opening. Now, this was a result of a horrific crime spree back in 1982. 7 people died after ingesting cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. It was also dubbed the Tylenol murders. Now, this event traumatized the entire nation and led to panic and concern, doubt, all causing manufacturers to try to quickly solve this problem, which could have easily been to any similar product line, not necessarily just Tylenol. We go to the pharmacy, we go to the clinics to get medicine to get better, and in turn, we get something that could kill us. I mean, it was the things of nightmares. Number one, these were capsules, and by the design, you could at that time very discreetly take them apart, empty them, alter what you put them back together. No one would be any the wiser. Number two, the pill bottles themselves were quite easy to open and close back then, without any indication of a removal or tampering whatsoever. So what's the solution? Well, it was to put one of those pesky plastic-coated round foam circles from the 9th gate of hell inside, sealing the top of the bottle. Apparently, while they were in hell forging these devices of sorrow and torture, they also included a glue that they must have gotten from Satan himself, because those babies are on there solid.
Eric, do you
I hate
struggle
these.
with pill bottles?
I struggle with these.
I was going to say, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're annoying more than anything, but
Bill, if you walked in on me in the kitchen opening a bottle of pills, you would probably within 10 seconds see me grab a butter knife and stab said thing to try to rip this thing off. I hate them. However,
I just tap through it with my finger.
Maybe
Maybe you need stronger fingers.
Maybe you do. However, it does serve as a silent guardian of that terrible past event in history and adds safety features for us today, unless I stab myself with a butter knife, even though it does drive at least part of us nuts.
Well, if you've ever struggled to make ends meet a little bit, or you've been a college student, it seems to be very common. You've indulged in a block of ramen or two in your day. Personally, I don't have any problems with ramen at all. I love ramen.
I like ramen.
Now, ramen, as you may well know, is a Japanese dish, and in Japan, they take ramen very seriously, and they prepare ramen in a much different way. Of course, when you think of ramen in America, you're thinking instant ramen, but in ramen in Japan, they have ramen restaurants, and they add chicken and pork and eggs and vegetables and things. But ramen in general, of course, originated from China. It was brought to Japan in the 19th century by immigrants, and post-World War II, saw an amazing rise in the popular street food of ramen. Now, why is that? That's the question. Well, because the people of Japan were starving and they needed food. Now, during the American occupation and, the damage inflicted on Japan by the Allied nations, America is very, very guilty. Food supplies were running dangerously low as production of the country's staple food, rice, experienced its worst harvest in 42 years. Now, most Japanese dishes needed rice. Ramen, however, was a noodle made with wheat. And so black market food stalls began to appear across the country to profit off these starving masses. And with the food distribution system running nationwide about 20 days behind schedule, which you can imagine puts a strain on anyone, these illegal food stalls just became essential in keeping people fed. Now, there were an estimated 45,000 of these stalls in Tokyo alone by October 1945. Now, during this time, it was illegal to buy or sell restaurant foods because, one, the U.S. occupation, but two, the U.S. was just continuing a wartime ban on outdoor food vending that was started by Japan's government to help control rationing. So they didn't want people just being able to go and buy whatever they wanted. They needed to control what was getting where. Now, Americans began importing wheat to help supplement the devastated rice harvest, and seeing an opportunity to make some quick and easy money, the Yakuza stepped in and started seizing these wheat shipments. Now, of course, the Yakuza's noble, let's say, and they would redirect this wheat to the street vendors, who then would turn around and prepare ramen and sell ramen out of these street stalls illegally.
Keep their people alive.
Yeah, 90% of black market food vendors were controlled by the Yakuza at the time. And the Yakuza, of course, look, we'll give you the food, you sell the food, you give us a little cut. It'd be a shame if something happened to your food stall, you know. And in addition to having to pay the money to the Yakuza, thousands of ramen vendors were getting arrested because, again, this was illegal to sell restaurant-type foods on the street. Well, finally, by 1950, I believe, the restrictions were lifted, and it is this surge in the popularity of ramen that most people believe made ramen the popular dish that it is today. I mean, it just out of necessity, they had to switch from rice-based to wheat-based and then you have ramen.
My next one is the not-so-etiquette charcuterie boards. Today's charcuterie boards look quite elegant.
Okay, we say that differently. I say charcuterie.
Charcuterie?
But maybe that's just me.
It's a fancy word.
I know it's French or something, so I'm probably getting it wrong.
Just so you guys know, we're talking about the fancy polished
little
boards.
Wooden board that you put
almost looks like a cheese cutting board.
You put like slices of cheese and ham and crackers or whatever.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. However you want to pronounce it.
It's fancy.
It's fancy.
Fancy cracker tray.
It's kind of a sign, or was a sign, of higher class living today. A sign of the rich, or bouginess, you might say. But that wasn't always the case. This actually goes back to the 15th century in France, where those delightful little food trays that we now associate with various meats, cheeses, and grapes, well, its origins was all about not letting anything go to waste. Yeah, put aside the flamboyant layers of stacked meats and nuts and fruits and elegant delights. Replace that with literally everything else left over after meals that were prepared or processed. I'm talking every single part of every single animal. The house might have been, butchering. I mean, hooves, entrails, reproductive organs, even bones.
Yeah.
A bit of far stretch from nibbling into the prosciutto and brie by the poolside today, but next time you dine on one of those delectable trays, give at least a head nod and an acknowledgement for those who came before you that ate it just to keep from starving and were happy to get whatever literally the house would not throw out.
Now, I saw a reference that the charcuterie board was also a way to trick people into eating things they wouldn't normally eat, along the lines of what you were saying, but more so for, like, say you
dress it up.
Well, say you were serving a pork product and you had a Muslim or a Jewish person at your table. They wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the difference when you cut it real thin and slap it on a piece of wood.
Oh.
And so it was like a deceptive way of just serving whatever you wanted, regardless of what your guest wanted.
Sneaky.
That would be rude.
Decaf coffee's dark past. You might be surprised to learn that decaf coffee is intertwined with Adolf Hitler and even the Third Reich.
Now, wait a minute. Adolf Hitler was known for getting all drugged up. Why would he want decaf coffee?
I asked myself the same thing. I had to dive a little deeper. Well, it goes back to the creator, the original inventor, Ludwig Rosales, I believe is the way you pronounce his name. I apologize if I butcher that. The inventor of the world's first successful decaf coffee launch, known as Cafe Hague. Now, Cafe Hague was a staunch supporter of Adolf Hitler and his beliefs and ways, in so much that his new decaf coffee became the #1 designated selection to not only Adolf Hitler himself, but the entire Nazi regime, being served at all the political parties and all of the youth rallies to promote Leadstrom, or peak performance. And my thoughts was, maybe with decaf, you get a better peak performance that's not chemically enhanced. That's the only thing I could draw out of that. I was
going to say, like, how many people have to have a cup of coffee in the morning to get started?
Yeah. And you're drinking decaf coffee. I'm sorry, decaf coffee drinkers out there. I know my mom and dad are. Why bother? Get some water.
Well, coffee is not good enough to drink if you're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's like non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
I don't like the taste of beer. And so if you're not going to get the chemical side of that, what's the point of drinking it?
What's the point? You maybe add some milk to it. Now you have milk and water. I don't get it. How about those cute circus-style balloon animals?
Oh, I saw a horrific origin story for balloon animals.
The whimsical and fun art of balloon animals have been a staple for circuses, clowns, and birthday parties for decades, if not centuries. But they did not always have such an upbeat effect. Centuries ago, we find out that the Aztecs were making what we believe to be the first examples of these out of cat intestines. The Aztecs would carefully prepare these inflated intestines by stretching them and blowing them up, much like you would a balloon. Bill, your hands are in the air. You're making gestures. You're either casting a spell on me.
In my mind is imagine the first person to come up with this idea.
Yeah, blow into that cat intestine.
We got some cat guts over here.
I wonder
what would happen
if
you put your mouth on one end of that.
Oh. Well, these Aztecs would carefully prepare and inflate these intestines by stretching them out, blowing them up, as I said, very similar to what we would with a balloon today. And they would then be worthy only to be given to the king or the gods as a fitting tribute. Again, what says, I respect and adore you more than a cat intestine blowed up with some air? It was a part of their culture, complex association with life and death and existing with nature. Well, at least they did not give them out dressed up as clowns at kids' birthday parties back then. So there's that.
That's gross. Well, from the whimsical, balloon animal, I got a little quick one here. Pink lemonade. No one's really sure where pink lemonade first came from. And nowadays we all agree that pink lemonade is just lemonade with some grapefruit juice in it. It's been theorized, not completely proven, that pink lemonade was just normal lemonade sold by a circus vendor. Now, the story goes, during a water shortage, lemonade vendor Pete Conklin used the only source of water that he had available to him, which just happened to be water that a carny was using to wring out her pink tights.
Oh.
So, as she wrung out her tights, the pink dye stained the water pink. Now, it was the only water he had available to him, so he grabs this water, throws in his lemon and his sugar, to, hopefully cover up any flavor. And he rebranded it as strawberry lemonade. The story goes he had the highest sales he ever had, as much as twice as many glasses of lemonade sold with this discolored lemonade.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so from that point on, he decided he was just going to go ahead and color it pink, call it pink lemonade, and boom. He was just making money hand over fist with it.
Just hired some more people that had pink clothing, and that's how you
Another story says that pink lemonade came about when Henry Abbott accidentally dropped cinnamon candy into the lemonade he was selling.
I like that
more
story much better.
More palatable story by leaps and bounds. So, back to terrible origin stories. Well, not that one was great. The treadmill. Now, if you're an overweight guy like me, the idea of walking any amount of time on a treadmill would seem like some kind of torture anyway. The treadmill of today is simply an evolved version of the tread wheel of the early 1800s. Now, this was an energy-producing, human-sized... The hamster wheel was used a lot. I don't know that that's necessarily what you would phrase it as, but imagine, if you will, the paddle wheel on the back of a big paddle boat, paddle steamer. Now, imagine if you had, instead of an engine driving the paddle wheel, you had men lined up, walking up this paddle wheel, to keep it moving. That was what they did in England in the early 1800s as part of punishment for people sent to prison. They would have these big wheels, and they would have these guys walk on them, and it would generate power. It would operate, grist mills. They would grind, grains and things with it.
I wonder how that would work. Do you do it for a certain period of time, or until somebody collapses and they're like, "Hey, tag, you're it. You got another person in there."
They were first debuted in 1818, and you could have as many as 40 convicts working on them. They were sometimes referred to as the eternal staircase. They would do 8-hour shifts.
Wow.
And they would just walk. Well, climb, as it were. Now, mind you, these guys were in prison, so a lot of times they had pretty poor diets. And they were expected in a day to climb a distance. And I say climb, it would be like climbing stairs, but it would be the equivalent of between 5,000 to 14,000 feet per day. some people compared that to climbing a small mountain every day.
That's a rapid weight loss program.
Now, these men were already in weak physical condition, so you can only imagine what would happen if one of these guys were to, say, fall into the works.
Collapse.
Now, prison reformers at the time said that the treadmill would quiet the beastly spirit of the worst offenders, and that, and yes, prisoners were profoundly affected by their experience. Notable author Oscar Wilde spent time on the treadmill during his 2-year sentence, and many claim that played a huge role in his untimely death just 3 years after release at the age of 46. And one prisoner once wrote, "I have worked for months on the wheel. I was quite well on coming in. I have now a great pain in the back part of my legs, my loins, and my left side. I get weaker every day. I can hardly stand upright. I know not how I shall be able to do a day's work. I have nothing to depend on but my labor."
As someone who has some lower back issues, again, I'm trying to envision this. You would be leaning forward almost constantly,
like you're climbing
those steps. That would do a number on your lower back. Oh my gosh, and legs and everything else.
Now, wow. I did see that it was used in America during the same time, but within, by the mid 1800s, I think they had said, okay, this is too much. And they transitioned over to like breaking rocks and things like that.
So there's an idea for a business. We open up a torture chamber, much like exercise places, and we charge people to join it once a month, or monthly fees, and you come in and torture yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think people already do that.
It's pretty close. Maybe it's not a new idea. How about bowling and its paranormal past? In Germany around 400 CE, or what's known as the Common Era, the good old game of bowling, it wasn't just a game. Oh, no. Not to them. It was part of a spiritual ritual, a revival to rid the participant of sin, to symbolically represent something such as sin or even an evil that one might carry with them. You would throw round, small stones towards a single pin, and if you could knock that target down, it at least symbolized conquering that sin or that evil, separating it from you and knocking it over, representing slaying the demon or the devil, separating you and breaking that tie. Now, the single club used at this time was known as the German word of a kegger. This same, which is a representation, or this represented sin or evil. This kegger term is still kind of used today. When the keggen knocked down, it might be called a kegler, which is an old term that was still used as a description of a bowler. You wouldn't call them a bowler. They were a kegler. So it goes back to that tie.
When you say that someone's a kegler, it makes me think of Kegels. So if you called someone a kegler, that's totally
a little
different.
That's a little different. How about the Battle of Cooties? Now, we've talked about girls giving boys cooties or vice versa on one of our previous episodes.
Not that long ago.
Yeah. Well, in a previous episode, actually, number 164, Things We Fear or Feared, part 1. But truth be told, it was nothing to laugh about. The original cooties refers back to body lice that soldiers fought silently in the trenches of World War I. Yep, cooties was a nasty little microbic parasite that dug down into the scalp of your hair or lived underneath the skin cells of your body. These poor souls who caught it often had open sores and bled and festered, and an itch similar to that of what we in Missouri would refer to as like being bit by a bunch of seed ticks. If that wasn't enough, these little menaces would also be able to survive and live in blankets or coats, where they would reinfect anyone that got up against them, spreading disease and illness. It was a terrible time to be a soldier in the foxholes during the war. You could either freeze to death and scratch yourself possibly to death, or if you were to take up that blanket or coat provided for warmth, you would be reinfesting yourself and have to put up with this. You could quite possibly contract nasty diseases, become so sick you could not control your own bowels or keep food down.
Ugh. Graham crackers. How could they have a strange or sinister origin?
I love me some graham crackers.
Oh, I love graham crackers. And I don't even have to like s'mores, like I'll just eat graham crackers.
I'll just open a package, whole package gone in one night, yeah.
Well, the graham cracker was introduced by Presbyterian minister Sylvester Graham. So you can say they're Graham's crackers. Now, he saw a serious problem plaguing the youth of the day. Now, he would not name it directly, and I'm not going to name it directly here, but he referred to it as self-abuse. Take a moment. You can probably know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Eric's puzzling
I'm
it, but I think
there.
he's gotten there.
Yeah, okay.
Let's say he created this specially bland cracker as part of a diet intended to curb carnal urges.
Gotcha.
So when you combine self-abuse and carnal urges, I
We
hope
have
you know
graham
where I'm going.
crackers.
Yeah, yeah. Now, he claimed that the cause of many maladies of the time, including, strange sexual appetites, was because of the diet people were eating, and so he said if you ate a diet of bland food and it was high in fiber, it would keep you from feeling the need to feel yourself, I guess.
Express yourself.
Now, he himself was a vegetarian who abstained from caffeine, alcohol, sugar, fat, tobacco, and spices. A lot of those things that make food worth eating. And since he himself did not experience any of these urges, clearly the diet must be the problem. The people who weren't eating like him, were going to experience these problems. And so,
Wretched sinners.
the world must have a cracker. Now, the typical breakfast of the time was eggs, ham, sausage, fried potatoes, biscuits, pancakes, and coffee, which sounds delightful.
All tastes good.
Those were too rich. Graham said they were too rich, they were too high in fat, and so he presented the graham cracker. These were nothing like the graham crackers we know today. They were designed to have virtually no flavor and were made from finely ground, unbleached wheat flour, wheat bran, and coarsely ground wheat germ. A Adam D. Spritzen once wrote about the cracker, "It was stale tasting and harsh to chew. It would be hard on our modern palate. It was partly in response to the rise of industrial baking, which Graham thought was a less healthy form of bread." Graham, as a matter of fact, once wrote that he thought white bread made with bleached flour caused a lazy colon.
Where do people come up with this crap?
Now, I do believe Graham was also associated with Kellogg, Mr. Kellogg, who, there's the movie, I believe, Road to Wellville. Is that the name of the movie?
Something like that, yeah.
But Kellogg had some crazy ideas about diets and urges, and part of the same kind of thought pattern also led to the emergence of many of the cereals that we know today, or at least one in particular.
And I will pick up right there with Mr. Kellogg and his story, but before I do, I'm pondering Mr. Graham, who created the cracker because it was bland and it tasted bad, but it kept you on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
Leave it to us Americans to take that and add some gooey marshmallow and chocolate to it and become sinners of the graham cracker and turn it into something much more palatable.
Yes, Eric, when I eat s'mores, I absolutely, no, I'm not going to. I don't get those urges from eating s'mores.
Cereal to curb your sexual desires. The tale of Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, of an esteemed Kellogg breakfast cereal, could have an entire podcast episode to itself.
Kellogg was weird.
He was one strange dude. His non-traditional ways of thinking, practice, and teachings of diet and exercise and religion were all rolled into one for this devout Seventh-day Adventist who had money and power to do with what he wanted. Kellogg believed essentially, if it tasted good, it was a sin, and it would entice the body to sexual desires and urges not wanted or desired within the church.
Well, him and Graham had a lot in common.
They had a lot in common. Therefore, his belief was everyone should eat a bland, almost non-tasting food to help satisfy and curb those sexual urges. He also believed in a vigorous exercise regime. It was necessary in order to run the demons out of the body, much like running a horse or a mule for long periods of time in circles to wear them down. His eccentric beliefs and practices could not help but to overflow into every box of cereal he created at the time, which included Kellogg's Corn Flakes, Rice Krispies, Special K, to name a few.
And think about, like you said about the graham cracker, what
did Americans do?
What did we do with we created Frosted Flakes and the Fruity Pebbles
sugar and weird colored marshmallows and
or what you could call a marshmallow.
Imitation
I don't know.
marshmallow. Now, personally, I'm one of those weird people who actually enjoy the taste of Rice Krispies or Cheerios non-Kellogg branded, but I've never been a fan of sweet cereal. I despise anything with those marshmallows that you mentioned that leaves my milk blue, purple, pink,
First of all, I don't like milk. I'm not a milk drinker. So milk is sort of a necessary evil when it comes to cereal. Now, I will say my all-time favorite is Golden Grams. I love Golden Grams. But as a near 50-year-old human adult male, I mean, if there's Lucky Charms in the house, I'll eat Lucky Charms.
Being like some Flintstone Pebbles.
Now, I'll usually eat it like a snack more than anything. Like, I'll just put some in a bowl. I won't put any milk in there. I'll just eat it dry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not above eating some marshmallow cereal, man.
And then kind of along the same lines in the bread and pastries, the fungus that drove you mad. One of my all-time favorite comfort staple foods, I gotta say, is bread and pastries. However, in either form, back in the day, bread could have unimaginable, horrific attacks on your body for eating it. As little as one bite of your favorite bread or pastry could be enough to send you spiraling down a horrific trip of hallucinogenics, fevers, fits, or even gangrene, all because of a tiny little fungus called the ergot fungus. Now notable for its black spiky tendrils that lived on many of the forms of the rye and wheat in which it was made from. A single loaf could take down an entire family or a community. Served in a restaurant, it could also affect anyone unlucky enough to wander in off the streets for a meal. Some even believe this could be part of the source of the hysteria that launched the Salem witch trials, which again, another plug, we covered as a topic, episode number 50.
I knew we had covered ergot poisoning. I just couldn't remember where.
December 2021. That's going back a few. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, untreated or misdiagnosed, the ergot fungus could cause severe intestinal trauma or even a loss of limbs. Now, we have figured out what was causing it and that the ergot fungus grows only on wheat and rye when it is in less than favorable conditions. So basically, if the plant is struggling to survive, to get all of its nutrients, that would kind of open the door for the infestation of the ergot fungus. Thank heavens, we Americans have learned, and we don't seem to have to worry about that anymore. However, ergot fungus still does pop up, and it does exist today, especially in third world countries where those conditions for growing are not as favorable.
Well, we're going to venture to another part of, Graham and Kellogg's fascination, and I'm going to talk about the origins of the chainsaw.
Chainsaw. So we're getting away from the food aspect here a little bit.
We're not going to talk as much about food, but you will see how some of the things they were trying to stop will come into play here shortly.
All right.
Now, the first chainsaw was literally...
I got to say now, before you get into chainsaw, that's the manliest man thing I can think of.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty much, yeah.
Today.
The first chainsaw was literally a chain saw. It was a chain with serrated teeth that was held by two wooden handles, and you would grab either side of it, and it would saw through things. It was originally invented in 1780 by doctors John Aitken and James Jeffray from Scotland, and it was intended to be used to help remove obstructive bone. I believe they would have a needle on one end of it, and they would essentially thread the saw around a bone using this needle, much like you would do stitches.
Okay.
Pull the saw the other side and then use those two handles to saw through the bone. You may have seen it in movies about like the Civil War. They used
them. Removing a limb, that kind of stuff. Okay.
At the time, they called their device the Aitken's Flexible Chainsaw. And it was used to speed up the process of, now this is a really long medical term, symphysiotomy, which would be the widening of the pubic cartilage.
Well, that's not quite the manliest man image I was envisioning, Bill.
They, of course, would also use it to remove disease-laden bone. Now, and later, to cut away flesh cartilage, but whatever, to help speed up surgical processes in a day when surgical processes were still pretty rough. And they would also use it, during childbirth if the baby became stuck in the birth canal to help widen the space. Like
the birth canal.
I don't know how to say it any other way. Now, a further evolution of this idea was developed in 1830 by German precision mechanic and orthopedist, strange combination of jobs, Bernhard Hein. This instrument would be called the osteotome and was powered by a hand crank and looked much like a kitchen knife in a way. Now imagine like an egg beater, a manual egg beater.
That's what I was
instead
envisioning.
Of beaters, it was like a knife with little teeth going around and around and around.
That's horrific.
This was also used to cut bone. Now the chainsaw that we kind of know today first emerged during the early part of the 20th century. And in 1918, we had the first portable chainsaw created by Canadian James Shand. And obviously, one of the original innovators of the modern chainsaw was a gentleman with the last name of Steele.
Steel. Imagine that. Yeah. How about 7-Up and lithium poisoning? Now, we've probably heard...
Sounds like a terrible combination.
Terrible combination, yes. Why would people do this? Most of us have probably heard that the original Coca-Cola used to contain just a little bit of cocaine.
Just a little.
Just a little. Thus where it gets its name, Coca-Cola, or its derived name. But it wasn't the only beverage with a wayward past. 7-Up, the sparkling lemon-lime refreshing drink that many people enjoy and love. Or, in my case, if I'm not feeling too well, I like it to, kind of satisfy the stomach.
I've heard people say that it doesn't work for them.
It does me.
I tend to drink a little bit because it's that whole ginger ale concept.
Mm-hmm.
I usually do like a 7-Up or a Sprite when my stomach's not feeling good.
Well, back in 1929, it was actually known as a lithiated lemon soda with the same 7-Up logo and the red box with the lettering that we still recognize today. Now, some early ads even mentions it settles the stomach or can be used from the home or hospital. I mean, it even said that there on the bottles, hinting to more of a cure-all potion rather than a refreshing beverage drink. But because of this lithium citrate that was added to 7-Up at the time, it seemed to have some other effects besides helping soothe the tummy. This drug was also known to be able to treat other illnesses such as bipolar disorder or depression, meaning that was later found that would be used to treat those things. We didn't know what we were doing at the time, or they didn't know at the time. But it was argued that the drink did not contain but only minuscule amounts of this chemical component.
And giant corporations would never lie to you about what's in their product.
Never. Now, however, even in the smallest doses over time, lithium has been known to cause serious health issues, including full-blown kidney failure. And it was removed from the 7-Up drink back in 1948, just after World War II. Leaving us with the sparkling lemon-lime refreshing drink that we have today. Let's go now to the green of St. Patty's Day. Many of us enjoy a pint of green ale or shamrock shake, or simply wearing green on St. Patty's Day to keep us from getting pinched. But as other topics of tonight, the tale of green has a less festive origin than one might think. It goes back to the 1840s during the Great Potato Famine of Ireland. Hundreds and thousands of people were dying of starvation, fleeing their homes and farms, coming to the cities in hopes where they would find scraps for meals. This is where the green actually comes in. You see, food was so scarce and hunger was so abundant that many Irish resulted into literally eating grass with livestock just in order to try to stay alive. Therefore, to find some green to eat and sustain your life in such a traumatic time was lucky, but not in the way we might have originally thought. So the next time you raise your pint of green beer and salute St. Patty's Day, remember the Irish, who were starving so bad they thought they were lucky to have some green grass to eat.
Wow.
One of the last ones for the night, those Egyptians and the early uses of lettuce.
You love Egyptians.
I do love Egyptian. I'm sure we've all sat down to a giant leafy green salad of some sorts, whether our mother made us do it or maybe we prefer it today. It might be the little side salad or the full-blown chef salad like I like, with boiled eggs and ham and cheese and all the goodness sprinkled over top. But to the Egyptians, lettuce didn't taste good at all. They hated it, but they also loved what it could do for them. You see, lettuce leaves were prized by the Egyptians, and to have a fresh supply meant to them so much more than just a few side salads to eat at lunch. They believed lettuce was an aphrodisiac, the little blue pill of its day, to make you feel a little more frisky and even increase chances of childbirth. Egyptian healers and priests often prescribed lettuce in small amounts to be consumed to help a king keep his legacy alive for future generations, to possibly bore a son. It was only served.
Again, let's go back to the graham cracker and all that and talk about s'mores. You ever ate a salad and been like,
oh,
hey, no, I don't feel that way after I ate a salad.
No. No. Actually, after I eat a salad, usually about 30 minutes later, it's like, man, I'm hungry.
Yeah, I wish I had something to eat.
It was also served openly in Egyptian celebrations for various events, but which might in the same way entail in having sex later that night. It was a gift of the pharaoh to his people to keep his nation strong and ever growing. So yeah, the next time you snarf down your salad at a meal, remember, you just had a meal fit for a king.
Well, I'm going to wrap up. I think we've talked about this before. I'm not much of a sports guy, but if there is one sport I can watch and actually follow, it's football. Now, obviously, football is a dangerous sport. Medical experts to this day are studying the effects of frequent head trauma. I think even in, multiple situations, a lot of those guys suffer lasting injuries, and sometimes it even makes them homicidal. I think
I can't imagine why.
In wrestling circles, Chris Benoit, when he murdered his family, they say it was because of the number of head blows he had sustained in his career. Now, of course, when your special move is diving off the top rope and hitting someone with your head, he probably took way too many.
Kind of be expected.
But football players, those guys take some pretty hard hits. Things used to be worse, though. Football's pretty hard hitting as it is, but in the early 1900s, the forward passing game was not part of football. As a matter of fact, it was illegal according to the rules of football. You could not throw the ball ahead of you. Now, you could sometimes do a side pass. You could pass to somebody beside, kind of a trick play.
A handoff.
But you could not do a forward pass. And of course, nowadays when you watch football, you've got those, long distance, beautiful spiraling passes. That was illegal. And because of this, defenders didn't have to worry about anyone being behind them. And so literally everyone on the defensive team only had one focus, a guy with the ball. And so
let's get ready to rumble.
At this point, players also were not wearing helmets. And this style of play led to many, many injuries and actually quite a few deaths due to football injuries. According to the Washington Post, in 1905 alone, there were at least 18 deaths and over 150 injuries just from the sport of football.
Wow.
Between 1900 and 1905, at least 45 players died due to football injuries. So a 5-year span, that's 9 a year. Now, these injuries would range from broken necks, concussions, broken spines, internal injuries, and more. And of course, much like today, it was still worth the risk for the money you were going to make. Things got so bad, as a matter of fact, that in December of 1905, arguably manliest man of presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, himself stepped in. He assembled reps from Harvard and from Yale and other coaches and brought them to the White House. And again, this is a man who was once quoted as saying, "I believe in rough games and in rough manly sports. I do not feel any sympathy for the person who gets battered about a good deal so long as it is not fatal." This man, manly as man, again, Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy the man.
At this point, even he said, you know what? Football is way too dangerous. He demanded new rules be put into place so that players would lean more towards battered and not murdered.
That would have to be the potential times 100 of being called to the principal's office. Can you imagine
the
getting
president
a call?
Calls you in.
I need to see you in the Oval Office.
So after this meeting, the most notable change to the game of football was the introduction of a new rule that allowed the quarterback to throw the ball up the field.
Passing.
This forced players on the defensive team to spread out to cover as much area as possible, cover as many receivers as possible, and thus dividing their attention so that every man on the defense wasn't focused just on the guy with the ball.
Wow. Well, as Bill said, I think we've discovered yet another episode here where quite possibly we will have a part 2.
Well, like I said, even the examples that I used with you discussing the topic didn't even make it into my stuff.
Yeah. So I think it's time for headlines. So with all the inventions we've discussed tonight, many with darker pasts than what we might know or want to remember, I thought, well, I wonder what neat things have been discovered in the year 2024. So I dove in, and here's just a partial list of a few things of inventions that not necessarily were out of a darker past, but maybe we'll be talking about some other time. Number 1, the Walking Assist Robot, an extremely lightweight wearable suit to assist those with physical disabilities, or it can be used during exercise. Number 2, a solar-powered electric vehicle. Providing we never lose the sun, we are now releasing small versions of 100% solar-powered vehicles, but rest assured, we've already thought ahead. There's backup pre-charged solar batteries, too. Bill's laughing.
My son, we try not to get political. I know. My son sent me a clip from a speech that Donald Trump was giving. Talking about how, the left likes their electric vehicles and they want to have electric planes and cars and boats
Planes and trains and automobiles.
And Trump's question was, well, what happens when the plane tries to fly at night?
Batteries?
Yeah, I mean, that's what a battery's for. When you have an electric-powered thing, batteries still work at night.
Well, number 3, a desk bike. You can use it in the office or the home to charge your cell phone and even your laptop or smaller devices.
There you go.
Going right back to what you talked about.
That is an amazing idea. You get one of those for your kids. Like your
you don't have to put a quarter in anymore. You just got to be physically active to be on the computer.
Around too much looking at screens, fine. You can look at the screen all you want, but you got to plug it in and charge it.
Get in there and work if you want to play on the computer game.
I could benefit from that.
Number 4, a pee predictor. You heard me correct. A pee, urine predictor.
I was going to make a joke about PEA.
No.
Like a green pea.
A pee.
Because
no, we're talking PP.
I don't know. I couldn't think of anything funny. So.
A PP predictor. They have developed a tiny computer that will predict how long you will have until you need to go relieve yourself. So plan accordingly.
How out of touch with your own body are you?
I am thinking this would be more for a partial disability medical situation. I thought the same thing. It's
definitely not something I need. I got a pretty good idea of how often I pee.
My mind went to that very sarcastic, dark place of, are we talking about, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, but, the 800-pound person eating the 4th bag of Cheetos in their underwear and a beanbag saying, hey, buddy, you ain't got up and moved in 10 hours. You're going to have to go pee-pee. So, beep, beep, beep,
Look,
beep.
bro, we know it takes you like 10 minutes to get out of the chair.
Yeah.
So you better get moving now.
You got 12. Number 5, targeted hearing devices.
I read about that.
This is kind of cool.
Those sound cool.
This is for those people hard of hearing. It's always been an issue, especially like at parties or gatherings, multiple conversations, background noise. Well, this invention allows you to hone in on only the tones that you wish to listen to.
They can be directed and targeted. You can look at a person, and once it homes in on that person, you don't even have to keep looking at them.
Yes. It'll pick up. You can basically, I assume you okay, I want to listen to what this person has to say, or click a button or something. But I can imagine if you, as a family group, you go somewhere, maybe it's a big movie premiere and, everybody's out there talking, but you're trying to talk with your family about the movie. You can pinpoint, your daughter, your son, your wife, and you'll be able to hear them in amongst all this other, and you can block the other out, basically turn that down.
Now, how much money would you bet that this is one of those things that's been around for 15, 20 years in the hands of the government?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just now getting released to the public as a thing?
Well, Bill,
because that'd be an amazing spy tool.
If you ask my wife, Sarah, she says I already have this technology. It's called selective hearing.
Yeah. I mean, we all have that. Or most men, my wife would say the same thing. I know I can say the same about my kids.
And number 6, a mental health mirror. One of the first things most people do in the morning when they wake up is, of course, go to the bathroom and you look at yourself in the mirror.
My mirror would just look like a thunderstorm all the time.
Well, with this new technology, Bill, you can bring into your home, the magic mirror right out of Walt Disney will speak to you, and it will tell you, it will monitor your facial expressions, the tint of your skin, and give you precautions to offer coaching to make your day just a little bit better.
I don't know if my mirror's up for that.
I'll be like, boss, I'm going to be late to work again. The mirror's still talking to me.
My mirror said something, and I'm in no condition to leave the house.
It's worse now.
Well, from one 6-point list to another. From ReadersDigest.com by Elizabeth Yuko, dated January 20th, 2021. 6 things former presidents aren't allowed to do after leaving office. We talked about everyday ordinary things, and that's kind of where my mind went with this one. I know it's not exactly like a dark secret or whatever, but I found it kind of interesting. I knew some of these already. I didn't know all of them. But there are restrictions about what presidents can do while they're in office, obviously, and then what they can do once they leave the White House.
Are we talking legally or just they get away with it because they're president?
Well, legally speaking.
Okay.
The president's not supposed to do these
So,
things.
I mean, let's face it, as a president, there's that aspect
There's
too.
an item on this list that one previous president may or may not have done.
I could probably guess.
So according to Mike Purdy, presidential historian, quote, when a president leaves the White House for the last time and turns the keys over to his successor, there is one very fundamental shift in his status that occurs. It's not just about moving out of the historic and majestic White House. The biggest change occurs at the tick of a clock's second hand on January 20th every 4 to 8 years. That moment at noon is when a new president is sworn in, and the now former president suddenly becomes a private citizen once again. I like the wording of that.
Yeah.
So even after leaving office, former presidents continue to be public figures, obviously. They're still very involved in politics and things like that. And they're still in possession of a lot of confidential information about the country and the government from the time that they spent in the Oval Office.
And correct me if I'm wrong, they're still addressed as president.
Yeah, they still have the title, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
They'll also continue to keep receiving these perks that U.S. presidents get to keep, Secret Service and all that stuff. And while they're welcome to do things like move out of Washington or take up painting or whatever hobbies they may have, being the former president of the United States will continue to dictate different aspects of their lives up to and including their funeral arrangements. So between 12:01 p.m. Eastern Time on January 20th and the day that they pass on, former presidents are required to follow plenty of rules, including the following 6. Number 1, former presidents cannot legally violate the law. Seems obvious.
Yeah.
Like all other private citizens, former presidents are not allowed to break the law. If they do, they're subject to the same prosecution as any other person. Not only is the president not above the law, former presidents are not above the law either.
Wonder how many mug shots there are of past presidents. I can't
thought
think
we
of a
weren't gonna
single
get political,
one. I
Eric.
can't think of a single one.
I know one.
Sorry.
Number 2, former presidents cannot sell or share classified. Okay, let me start over. I'm going to keep that in just for effect. Former presidents cannot sell or share classified information. You may have known this was where that was going to end up.
Mhm.
In what could be a huge breach of national security for the nation, a former president may not sell or share classified information obtained while, again, being president. So, again, this just reiterates that former presidents are not above the law. It's still illegal.
We're not saying anything. We're just saying stuff.
Yeah, we try not to be political, but some of these were kind of funny as I was reading. Now, anyway, number 3, 2-term presidents may not run for president again. I mean,
Yep.
that's been pretty much established. After Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected for a 4th term as president, some lawmakers began to say, hey, there should probably be a limit on how long you can be president.
Yeah.
And so, maybe having one guy in charge for an extended period of time might be a little bit too much like having a king. I mean, well, hey, buddy. So, in fact, until Roosevelt, as a matter of fact, no president had served more than 2 terms. It just hadn't happened. So, the 22nd Amendment capped an individual to being elected only twice. The 22nd Amendment also provides that if someone served less than 2 years as president, say by taking over the presidency due to the death or resignation of a president, it happens, then they could still be elected to 2 full terms.
Makes sense.
Number 4, former presidents can no longer drive on public roads. Now, this one I knew, but it seems weird to me, and there's not a real good explanation, I don't think. But
You're losing me on this one.
former presidents are not permitted to drive themselves around.
Okay.
This rule was created after the JFK assassination.
Gotcha.
Ex-presidents can no longer drive on public streets or roads, only on private property. They are required to be driven by Secret Service personnel who are specially trained in evasive driving maneuvers. LBJ was the last former president to drive on public streets. Number 5, former presidents can no longer receive secret deliveries. The Secret Service
Raised eyebrow?
The Secret Service inspects all mail for former presidents before it is delivered to them.
Protection. Okay.
This screening takes place at an off-site facility in order to keep any potential threat as far away as possible from a former president.
So if the former president's ordering a lot of stuff off of eBay or Amazon, expect delays.
Yeah. Now, this came in handy, especially in 2018, when the Secret Service identified suspicious packages sent to both Clinton and Obama. So, I mean, there's a reason for it. And number 6, former presidents cannot purchase their own electronic devices. Ex-presidents can't just walk into the Apple store and buy the latest iPhone. Technology like that must first be approved by the Secret Service. Along the same lines, the Secret Service is also permitted to use stingray devices, which are used to track the location of cell phones. This particular rule was broken by a former president not all that long ago who insisted that he get to use his own private device after leaving the office and was subsequently hacked multiple times by trying to use his own private iPhone.
Talk about a target. I mean, you can't even imagine.
Again, the president of the United States, you have to take some common sense precautions.
Common sense. That's a good way to put it. Well, I think that leads us to our questions. Question time. So, Bill, you and I share some, shall we say, more sarcastic tendencies.
Absolutely.
From time to time. Many things we've encountered, experienced, seen firsthand, especially in 20 plus years of management each. That kind of leads it to a whole new plateau. So my question for you tonight is, what do you feel is your top number one thing that you are exposed to, that you have to deal with, whether it be something that happened out of a tragic event that's changed the rules, a law, or whatever?
So like these dark histories behind a thing, maybe?
But something that just nails on the chalkboard for you, just really sets you off.
The fact that stupid people can sue people. I read these articles and I really get very frustrated with them. A good example is there was a guy who sued a school one time because he was trying to rob said school and he fell through the skylight. And so he sued them for negligence.
And I believe he won.
Yeah, he won. Absolutely.
I was there to break in.
Why?
And why not just arrest him?
No,
shut up. Why are you still talking?
The one that
You're
broke
arrested.
The law.
Yeah.
He's trespassing.
You don't have any rights here.
Another good one. I think there was a guy who was had a lawnmower. He was trying to figure out how to start it. He was working on it. He took it into his house to work on it. And I guess he had shag carpet or something. I don't know. He didn't want to start it while it was on the carpet.
This sounds like a bad Missouri story.
He lifted it up and propped it on his knee before he pulled the pull start.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have to be a genius to figure out where the bad idea on that one is.
Yeah.
He sued the company that made the lawnmower because they didn't put a warning on there.
Because their product worked.
Yeah, because it did what it's supposed to do, and you're not supposed to put your body in there. I guess maybe the warning sign... I wouldn't suggest
to have it on your shag carpet in your living room either, by the way.
Well, I guess maybe the warning sign that said don't stick your hand in there, well, it only applies to hands, right?
It didn't say knee.
And I know I've made this joke before, but in a place where you and I both used to work, there was a sign on the wall, no firearms permitted, but it was clearly a drawing of a revolver. And I used to routinely make the joke, well, clearly you can bring in a semi-automatic. That's a revolver.
It literally goes back to, here's your sign.
Yeah. Yeah, it's things like that. Like, there should be some sort of judicial thing like, okay, this case is just too stupid.
Yeah. Mine is similar. I actually have 4 little blurbs of real examples. And again, I know it may not be politically correct, but Bill took the words in my mind. It's like stupidity. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's just going to be labeled stupidity. The thing that's really irks me is that because of each one of these stupid warning labels, there was some history that led us to have said stupid warning label.
I think it's Larry the Cable Guy, and I could be wrong. He does a joke about Preparation H because it's got on the tube for
internal use only.
And he's like,
or extral use, whatever.
He's like, man, I ate this whole tube and it didn't do nothing for my hemorrhoids. Of course, I can only eat through a straw right now.
Well, I myself don't own a motorcycle. I know several people who do. And one of my friends took a picture of another one of their friends' motorcycle they'd just purchased. The warning label states, drinking alcohol while operating this vehicle may result in serious injury or death. Now, I thought to myself, maybe this means like drinking beer and driving. It's on the gas tank. So essentially it's like, don't drink gasoline.
Well, it says alcohol.
It does say alcohol, but
you can power a vehicle with alcohol.
You can. So I led into that one.
Don't drink out of the gas can.
Don't drink out of the gas can. So I led into that one as my first. Number 2, I was recently looking to purchase a wheelbarrow. You know, one of those that you use in the backyard, lawn work for leaves, dirt, rocks, whatever. And we were at our local department box store, I'll say. I see the warning label. Not intended for highway use. And I'm thinking, how?
You know that story came out of Missouri.
Yes.
Some dude hooked one up to a truck.
Oh my gosh. Number 3, Now, my daughter still uses one of those foldable child stroller kind of deals, the real robust ones that you can haul in the back of your vehicle. And if you're taking the grandson to the zoo or something, you can put them in there. Warning label. Not intended for highway use.
That's awesome.
You going to drag your kid back behind it? Behind your car?
No, you hook it up on the front. You push them.
Push them? Give them a little boost?
No, you drop it out the window of the door, right? Because the kid's making a lot of noise. You want to...
Now, if that wasn't alarming enough, there's a second warning label. Remove the child before folding.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Eric.
Somebody probably forgot that. That happened somewhere. And lastly, again, I'm going back. I have grandkids. This one really caught my attention. On several tags of children's clothing, seemingly more on pajamas for some reason, warning label states, always remove child before placing in washing machine.
Oh, my God. I like the...
What the hell?
Here's the idea. That whole comedy skit I was talking about earlier, like these warning labels, there has to be a story. The company had to get sued by someone first.
That's the scariest part.
So they added the label. So one of my favorites along those lines, hair curler. Hair curlers, the deals that you plug in, they get really hot.
Oh, yeah.
They have a warning label on them that says not for internal use.
Oh.
I don't want to imagine the person that figured that out.
No.
So mine is there a time where you've learned a secret or a story or something about a product that you used on a regular basis that made you say, I am never going to use that thing again? I can go first if you need to think.
Well, no, I have some, but I don't want to get political.
Well, don't. Well, I'm talking about like products.
I know.
How is that political?
Because of different things that they made us stand for.
Oh, well, I think that could get awkward for both of us.
Yeah, I don't want to. That's what comes to mind.
Because I definitely have some places that I won't go to, and they're probably for not the same reasons.
Right. So I don't want to do those. We'll cut that.
yeah. Well, okay. Well, I'll go first, and then you can think while I'm talking, and or maybe I'll spur you on. Back in the 90s, when Magic the Gathering became a huge thing, I was a Magic the Gathering player, and I really like the idea of card games in general, collectible card games. So I wasn't limited to just Magic. I bought them all, man. Vampire and Rage and Mech Warrior and all the Star Wars and Middle Earth and X-Files and Alien versus... If it was a card game, I probably tried it. And then Wizards of the Coast stepped in, and they decided, well, you can't just have a card game. We came up with this idea. Like, they were the first people to ever come up with a card game. And so they copyrighted or trademarked or whatever the phrasing is, but they owned the rights to the concept of a card game where you collect cards to play the game. Now, I have a addictive personality and a completionist mindset. If you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, think about that for a moment. Completionist mindset.
Right.
You're never going to finish with Magic.
No.
And so, I realized that I can't afford this hobby. 2, I don't agree with this as a business practice because it's bad for the industry as a whole. It's not fair that other companies have to pay Wizards of the Coast money because they made a game. It's not like Milton Bradley or Parker Brothers were like, oh, do you have a game that involves a board on a table? Well, you got to pay us money because that's our idea.
And not to interfere, but to mention that Wizards of the Coast also ripped off many of the artists that did artwork for those and cheated them left and right.
So at the time, I just started to boycott Wizards of the Coast in general. I didn't buy anything that they made, which unfortunately for me lasted until someone convinced me to play 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. But I will say, since then, I have only ever bought core rule books, and that's it. I don't buy anything else they make. I won't buy any of their card games. I don't get into anything that Wizards of the Coast is directly responsible for because I hate their business practices, which have gotten even worse now that they've been gobbled up by Hasbro.
Yeah, when you thought it couldn't get worse, it's gotten worse. Well, actually, you spurred me on for 2. One, I'm just going to touch on. Growing up, my dad used to work at Walmart. He sold shoes for many years at Walmart. It was kind of a secondary job. Now, back in those days, we're talking late 70s, very early 80s. Their motto was Buy American.
Yeah.
And I remember when that started in the late 80s, especially, started kind of deferring. And my family made a very staunch deal that we're we wasn't going to not shop at Walmart for limited amounts of places to shop.
You really don't have a choice.
But we're going to buy only American stuff. And that worked for a few years. But as you know now, not just Walmart, you can go anywhere. And you're hard pressed to find anything made in the United States. But that one is just a little blurred.
Well, to pile on to Walmart, when I was in college, one of my instructors was telling us a story, and I'm sure he was in economics or, accounting or whatever. He had a friend who owned a manufacturing facility that made printed T-shirts, and Walmart was one of their major customers. And I don't know the names, so I'm not going to name names, obviously. And again, this was a good 20-something years ago, so we're way past that. But he said the guy, never had problems with Walmart, always been a good customer, paid their bills and all that. If there was any complaints, they worked together to resolve them. We started getting complaints from Walmart. Hey, your last shipment was short. You X amount of units. And he would, okay, hey, man, no problem. They would package them up, ship them the missing.
Throw you in some extras next time or whatever, yeah.
And then happened again. Hey, yeah, no problem. Hey, sorry that happened. I don't know what went on. And that continued to happen for a little while until the guy, he couldn't understand what was going on. Either my people are just not doing their job, couldn't find anybody who was making any mistakes. So he personally hand counted a shipment going to Walmart. Personally, himself. He went and counted every box, sealed the box, recorded the numbers that he counted out by hand himself with someone there to witness to make sure, okay, I didn't make a mistake. Nope, you counted it. Okay. Made sure that every unit they ordered was on that trailer when it shipped.
And I know what's going to happen.
And he got a call from Walmart.
We're short.
Hey, buddy, you shorted us. And it was, the first time around, maybe it was 10 units. The second time around, maybe it was 15. I mean, it was hey, you were 3 boxes short or whatever. And he basically said, well, you can go screw yourself. Oh, well, we've always had such a good working relationship, blah, 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 blah. He says, I personally hound-counted that shipment. You have been screwing me, taking advantage of me and my good nature, exploiting me. And he said, we're done. And he ended his business relationship with Walmart. Unfortunately, with the way things are in America, I can only assume he probably went out of business.
Yeah.
But
gotta stand for
screwed
something.
over by the big guy.
Well, back to my more realistic, more life, more to date, and I won't get into explicit details, but as many of you all know, my wife, my son, and I had Ravensloft, hobby gaming store, which we still use as our recording center and warehouse. But I was involved with a lot of Comic-Cons during that time frame of about 8 years, to the point I was even asked to be on the board of directors of a couple, I'll say local kind of tri-state area cons, of new ones that were forming just for ideas and background. And we had a situation where a particular town had a previous Comic-Con. Those people had a small business. They moved away, to another state, far, far away. And a couple bought that store. At the time, the name, franchise, everything. Later, they changed the name. But they decided, because the Comic-Con had went over relatively well in the first couple of years, they wanted to do another Comic-Con for this small town. The former shop owners, who again, these people had bought the store from, tried to sue them for the words of copyright infringement on, get ready for this, the words Comic-Con. That is such a vague description reference.
Didn't another company step in and do that recently? I swear I read something about that.
There was some
big company.
There was a big company somewhere, I want to say out west.
Well, I'm thinking whoever it is that does San Diego.
Yeah,
I want to say they are trying to.
Well, there was some other mentions, and I think that's what got the idea here. But I will say, in this instance, they finally dropped the case because both of them ended up getting lawyers. Total waste of time and money. I'm sorry. And it's what are you gaining from this? You're in another state, for Pete's sake. What is the problem with having a local comic? But that one left just a horrible taste in my mouth because I won't say friends. I knew of all the parties involved, and literally I was stuck in the middle. And it's well, you're on the board. Can you maybe help filter this? It's oh, dude, you're putting me in an awkward situation here.
Yeah.
But to sue somebody on such vague words, it wasn't the town name Comic-Con or whatever, which again, that would be very hard, I think, to trademark when you're not even in that town anymore, but absurd. I'm sorry, just absurd ignorance. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed what may be part 1 of our Doc Secrets of Every Day. I know Bill and I both learned some things doing this one, some interesting little tidbits, and as they say, you can't make this stuff up. It just doesn't get much weirder than strange reality. And we hope that you've enjoyed it. We thank you ever so much for continued listening and support of Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Thank you.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us, if you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us. Reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
Along the same lines, the Secret Service is permitted to use stingray viruses. What the hell word was that?
What is that? You're making up stuff.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.